let's jump right in. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here at this event. My name is Amelia Faircloth, and I'm a fourth year English student here at UCSB. I'm also a web and social media intern for UC Santa Barbara's Humanities and Fine Arts Division. Before I introduce you all to our panelists here, and we start working through our great list of questions, I just want to give a little bit of background into HFA Speaks and this event in particular. So HFA Speaks is an event series that we run at least once every quarter, where we gather together professors from different departments under humanities and fine arts and pick their brains on a particular subject. So the event you guys are all here for today, HFA Speaks, Arts Evolving in a Pandemic, is exactly what the name suggests. We'll be talking about how art and performing art in particular has kind of changed as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic that we all find ourselves living with. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Professor Irwin Apple. Professor Apple teaches theater here at UCSB and serves as chair of the Department of Theater and Dance. He's also an actor himself, along with director, composer, and sound designer, and has worked for many prominent regional theaters. On top of that, Professor Apple is also the founding artistic director of Naked Shakes, a student theater company here at UCSB. Over the pandemic, Professor Apple has had to be creative with his theater productions. He's explored a variety of alternatives to the traditional stage, including Zoom productions like Immortal Longings and even outdoor performances like Twelfth Night. We're super excited to have you with us, Professor Apple.
Thank you.
Of course. And then next we welcome Delilah Mosley. Professor Mosley teaches dance here at UCSB. She's also a choreographer and director who's worked in a variety of styles like ballet, jazz, and modern dance. Additionally, she served as the director of UCSB Dance Company for 15 years. In April of 2021, the UCSB Dance Company premiered a really beautiful dance video entitled On Film and in Flight. The film combined dance with some artistic cinematic work and was premiered for a live Zoom audience. Thank you so much for being here with us, Professor Mosley. And then finally, we have Professor Victor Bell. Professor Bell teaches within the ethnomusicology program at UCSB's music department. Since the late 90s, he's also served as the director of UCSB's gospel choir. Founded over 25 years ago, the choir is known for its exciting performances of traditional and contemporary songs drawn from African-American religious traditions. In June, Victor Bell and UCSB Gospel Choir premiered a concert entitled Where Are They Now?, which was also released via YouTube premiere. Great to see you, Professor Bell.
Thank you.
Of course. So we can jump into the set of questions we have for everybody today. Before that, just a quick note as we're talking, if the audience members have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll get to those at the end of the panel. So let's get right into it. I touched briefly on this in everybody's introductions, but I kind of want to hear from everybody individually. What creative ways has your department or program found to adapt to remote learning? So Professor Apple, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Sure. And thank you again for having us. And you know, one of the things I wanted to say at first is creative ways of adapting. Right now, my virtual background behind me is the first, I believe, virtual background that we started using when we started adapting to Zoom theater. And it was part of a whole creation of how we, in effect, were designing scenery and environments for Zoom theater that evolved with a lot of creative energy. I will show you all very, very quickly that if I get rid of that, you will see I have a green screen behind me. I never thought in my life that I would have a green screen in my office, but I now do all my Zooms in front of this green screen so that I can change the backgrounds, and that's part of what we have been adapting to. I'm sure when Delilah speaks, she will talk about the particular challenges of dance. But as chair of the both theater and dance, we knew that when this pandemic hit, we had to respond immediately. We had to provide as creative opportunities as possible for our students. We knew that everybody, our students in particular, were dealing with this horrible transition to online learning, which really goes against everything that we do in theater and dance. But we sort of had as our motto for the department that out of adversity comes opportunity. And we began to look at Zoom as another theatrical medium to create. One of the great achievements that we did in the early part of the pandemic was our Launchpad new play development program uh, created Alone Together, which commissioned playwrights to write short plays specifically for Zoom. And it involved a huge amount of playwrights, directors, actors, crew, all working together to create this festival of new plays. It was really, really exciting. I myself directed a piece, acted in some pieces, and it was a way to try to get everyone involved and create some sense of community with while also acknowledging the reality that we were facing. And one of the I think the smarter and sadder things that we did as a department was going into the following year, which is, I think, what are we in now? 20, I can't even remember the years now. But going into the beginning of the year thinking, well, it's most likely that we are going to be remote for a long time. So let's plan our production season to be remote rather than kind of living on the cusp and waiting for the inevitable bad news. And what that allowed us to do is we commissioned a play specifically for Zoom. We did other work that was really unique to the medium, and we were trying to show our students and our audiences that we're not going to let this stop us.
Mhm.
It was much more difficult for dance. One of the things that I think is one of the more beautiful things in the department was put together by our guest Delilah, a video at the time, a beautiful dance piece that was dance's response to the pandemic. And we especially felt for dance because in theater, I don't know what this is like for Victor, in terms of the gospel choir and in terms of singing, but in theater, we have language. We're able to at least keep the art form going in a way in this medium, which is of course very, very different than dance, which needs to be synced up to music, which Zoom is not set up for, and space, etc. The other thing, and is so the other thing that Zoom does allow for is a kind of an intimacy. Like right now, we are all for equal on the screen. You're getting a kind of a window into our emotions, our what we're thinking, almost like a close up on a movie set. And so that we wanted to work to our advantage. The last thing I'll say about this, because I don't want to monopolize time, I apologize. The weird thing about adjusting to Zoom was that if I look at the screen right now and I'm looking at all three of you on my screen, it probably doesn't look to the audience like I'm looking at you. If I look up and look in the green dot on my laptop, it looks like probably I'm looking right at you or looking right at the other character on stage. However, I'm having this moment with a green dot and I can't see any of your faces right now at all, but I probably look like I'm communicating more directly with you. So all of these things were things that we had to learn to adjust to do the best we could to try to continue to produce, to make art during this difficult time.
That's incredibly interesting, the way that you're talking about Zoom as something that's really intimate, because I've had a different experience in my classes, but what you're saying is really true. The way that you're able to see everybody's faces, and it's a real close up of everybody's face all the time, so you can see those reactions. That's a really interesting thought that I haven't considered before. So thank you so much for that.
Sure.
And then let me turn to you, Professor Mosley. What was it like for dance? Professor Apple touched on it a little bit, how difficult it was.
I think it was much more difficult for dance because obviously dance is full body movement through space and large space. Especially at UCSB, we have wonderful large spaces. Our first quarter, end of 2020, was restricted to, I was teaching out of my bedroom and all the dancers were in a little space, which it was just a big shift. And then we went into the fall, and Christina McCarthy helped get us into the studios in a very complicated way. We were able to, one professor would teach in a room and be zoomed into 4 studios. So not only were we responsible for the room, we also were responsible for the other 3 studios. So it was a total of 4. Also, people were zooming from their house. So it was very fractured and split, but we were able to be in the studio, and the dancers kind of rotated which room they were in. They were able to dance, not as much as they would have liked. I think there were a few other professors that taught, but I basically was here every day for a year on campus by myself, and because everyone else was zooming. I mean, there were probably other people, but I felt like I was totally alone. And because I direct the student company, which every year performs throughout the year and travels to Europe, I realized I had to do something for these students. I couldn't just have them in the classroom for a year and nothing come from that. So I had this idea to do a dance film. I have no experience at all. It was just kind of from my heart and my imagination. And I had a wonderful filmmaker who helped. The dancers all created their own response to the pandemic, and we filmed it and wove it together. We had a guest choreographer from New York who zoomed in, taught a whole dance through Zoom in their living rooms. And because I was not allowed to film on campus, we went out to a park and filmed it, on gravel, basically. And then I filmed on the beach, I filmed on the cliffs, just anywhere. And it did turn out to be, I think, a very effective film, kind of handing on what the students felt. However, the reality was it wasn't really that pleasant to dance where I had them dancing. The final result was beautiful, but they're dancing in sand or in lawn or whatever. And so it's not something that I would say is a long-term solution. We need to be in the studio, we need to be in the theater. And last year at the very end, we had this golden little window opportunity, and we performed live at Center Stage after a year and a half of not being able to perform. And I walked into the dress rehearsal, and it was just like, this is where we belong. I mean, it was this incredible feeling that this is where we belong. I mean, we tried our best to make it work other ways, and a stopgap way we did. But the dance just needs space, and it needs, all those elements that are a part of being able to be in a space, either a studio or a theater or whatever. I would like to say just a couple more words about the students who, up and down, emotionally. Yes, we get to do it. No, we don't. Yes, we need to. And so I've been talking to them in preparation for this meeting over the last week or so, trying to get a feeling of where they are now after having a quarter of dance in the studio and performance, and then back to lockdown. And I think they're more accepting and a little bit more patient. I mean, they express the feeling that, yes, we know it's hard, but we know that we can get through this and come out on the other side. And I think in some ways it was a good learning experience. And I was saying, they all hate Zoom. They hate, it's different. I know, Irwin, for where you can speak and, do the acting, but they don't like the experience of trying to learn on Zoom, which I can understand. But I said, but you are learning skills. So now they know how to do it. They know how to share choreography through Zoom. I saw them getting ready for their audition the other day, and they were, teaching each other. So they have gained a skill, I guess you could say, that will probably be used in the future. So I think there is something that they have been able to take away from it, even though it's been hard. It's been hard.
Yeah, I love that you were able to talk with students and kind of engage their reactions to learning dance through Zoom. Because I think it's one thing to take normal academic classes through Zoom where you have the benefit of something like Gaucho Space, where you can read certain materials, but something as physical as dance, that it's a really different experience. Yeah. And then turning to you, Professor Bell, what was it like for music and for choir learning online?
Extremely challenging. It was extremely challenging because we are a performance ensemble. You know, we sing, and so I've been doing music for 40 plus years. I've never ever, not one time, had to have a rehearsal on Zoom or a rehearsal with people in different places. I had, students international in Brazil. I had some in Southern California, Northern. They were from all over. And I guess the good thing about it is, trial and error, and some things that you learned years ago, you put into practice. I had a mentor who taught me one phrase, and that phrase, she always told me, whatever happens, make it work. That was her thing. If you run into a challenge, make it work. And so when we said, okay, it's Zoom, we're going remote, I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to do choir remote? But that phrase came back to me, make it work. One of the things that I was able to do that I'm really, wasn't able to do when we meet live is because we're so concentrating on the music. I finally got a chance to really dive into the history of gospel music and why we do what we do, how it came about, to give them a sense of where it came from and the history and the richness of gospel music. So that was really, really exciting. And so when it came to the music portion, I was still like, how am I going to do this? And so we did some rehearsing remote, just try to teach some songs. But then I thought, I can make this work because we have a performance. I can make this work. So I decided, like the second week, hey, we have a performance. We're going to do this performance virtually, and we're going to make it work. So I just decided, I put in a date, like 6 or so weeks or so, say, hey, on this date, we're going to come together. We're going to find a large space. These are the songs that we're going to do, kind of teach and go over those songs, but we're going to meet this one day and we're going to go over this music, and then we're going to actually record virtually. And so that's what we did. I found a large space, a church in Los Angeles. We came together, of course, respecting all of the COVID guidelines. We were spread out, but we were actually able to do, about 5 or 6 songs and then do it virtually. And then we just presented it on YouTube. So it's been, very, very challenging. The last concert that we did, again, make it work. I thought, hey, this would be a great time to incorporate some of the alumni. Let's talk about where you've been, what gospel choir has meant to you, how did it relate to what you're doing now? And so it's been, creative, being creative. And I'm hoping that this don't last long because the creativity is short-lived in situations. Because when we came back remotely, the challenge is, of course, you're wearing masks inside, but how do you wear a mask and sing and learn at the same time? So it's been kind of crazy, but again, we've been making it work.
Yeah, it sounds like I never thought about the complications of masks and singing, but now that I think about it, yeah. that would be quite a daunting task. Thank you guys so much. Those were such interesting answers, and the creativity within all the departments and finding ways around or ways to work these restrictions into your art form is really incredible. So I have one here for Professor Mosley. I'm really curious, when I think about dance, you generally think of it as a really collaborative kind of art form where you're rehearsing in this really collaborative space and creating a sense of community. Has working over Zoom and remotely affected that sense of community at all?
Yes, I would say in the students who are not involved in a production, they feel dispersed. I mean, we're trying to keep them involved by making the classes as interesting and fun as possible. The students I work with in the company, I mean, I have meetings outside where we meet in person without masks, so we can, feel kind of like normal. They've been together for a number of years, so they're able to kind of carry through. We are now rehearsing in the studio as a company. So, and just finding ways to keep coming back to that sense of purpose of why are we here? Why are we coming every day to work our bodies? Because we are planning to perform, we are planning to tour, and keep reminding them of that purpose, basically. So it's not just marking time in a studio. I just want to say one more thing. In December, when the juniors performed in the Hatland Theater, and it hadn't been, of course, for a year and a half or 2 years, I came out after the first performance, and the crowd, I don't know if you were there, Irwin, opening night, it was just like a roar. It was unbelievable. I have never experienced that in all my years in the theater. Everyone was so excited to be back in person watching the dance that it was just like a roar. I mean, it kind of makes you say, yes, it is worth it to go through all these things we've gone through over the couple of years to be able to experience. It's making me cry. To be able to experience that and have the students, get to that point and be able to experience it.
I'm so glad you kind of brought in audience reactions to that, because I think that is something that is really different about online platforms, is you don't have that physical audience there. Professor Bell, I'm really curious. I know that gospel choir, when you go and you watch one of these gospel performances, the energy in the crowd is so electrifying, and there's all of this audience engagement. How is it different doing something over video or over Zoom without that physical presence of the audience there?
Again, extremely challenging. One of the things, with gospel music is we feed off of the audience. We feed off of that fellowship, that call and response. The audience gives us energy to do what we do, and then we try to give the audience energy. So it's a back and forth. It's a call and response. I kind of look at it, the difference between, because I've done all of it. There are times when gospel music, we will have what we call live recordings. You have the audience. But then there are times we do studio, and so you have to, in studio, there is no audience. So you have to bring your own energy. And I teach all the time, if you don't have the energy, the audience won't have the energy, because you give them the energy by what you're doing, and then they feed off of that. So when in studio or virtual, you have to come with the energy. You have to have your own energy, your own enthusiasm. And so from that standpoint, it wasn't really challenging, again, because we came into one big room, because even not just the audience, but even with the choir members, the fellowship, we feed off of each other. And so being in that large room and being together again really helped us. We were our own audience. But then again, last quarter was the first time we actually had a live performance since COVID had started. And so for me, it was like electrifying. I felt like I hadn't been in front of an audience in 2 years. And so, and I was actually thinking nobody's going to come. This is like, we haven't done a live performance in 2 years. It's still COVID. People don't want to come out. And when they opened that curtain and I saw all those people in there, I was just electrified. It just gave me an energy that I hadn't felt in about 2 years. Yeah. So, this is, again, been really challenging, but it's also been rewarding, to see how you can keep going, how you can still make things work in spite of the challenges.
I agree.
It's super interesting. I have one for you, Professor Apple. When you think about, all three of these different disciplines with theater and music and dance, they're all engaged in some degree of storytelling. But I'm curious to know if the stories that you chose to tell were a little bit different over the past couple of years as a result of the pandemic. Is it, trying to reflect the feelings everybody's feeling, or provide the kind of a sense of escape through theater?
Yeah, that's a great question because we really wrestled with that very thing. How do people really want to be reminded of what we're going through right now, or do people need to escape from it? And we found that it was always kind of a little bit of both. I know that it affected, for example, one of the projects that I worked on for a company, Naked Shakes, called Immortal Longings, which was a combining of Shakespeare's plays Julius Caesar and Antony and Cleopatra, along with another play by George Bernard Shaw called Caesar and Cleopatra. And I combined this all into one play that we did on Zoom, which was Naked Shakes being on Zoom. Now, I don't think I would have told that story if we were in person. If we were in person, I don't think we would have had the ability to put that script together, to stage it in the time that we had and with the resources that we had. However, on Zoom, it felt like, okay, this is the right time to try this. And I think we tried to find a bunch of projects like that in the entire department where we were, you know what, maybe this could actually work, not only work on Zoom, but maybe work better than if it would have been in person. Now, I want to echo what Victor and Delilah were saying, though. There is nothing like that feeling this year of being back in the theater. And I can only imagine for the gospel choir what that must be like. But I was there for the dance performance, the Kinetic Lab performance, where I felt that thrill. I wanted to roar like the rest of the audience. And I also felt like the other times when I've sat in some of our other theaters for other events so far, and I have fallen in love again with our spaces, with the energy of the theater itself. I sit there and fantasize about things that I want to create and get inspired and excited to do that again. And it has actually renewed faith in what we do. And I think that maybe there's something in common about what all three of us do, without please speaking for anyone or putting words in anybody's mouth. But the more that technology improves and grows, and the more that we become a society so immersed and dedicated to technology. I mean, now we're talking about the metaverse, and we're talking about all of this, virtual technology, remote technology that we've all had to go through. There is something about, we could be 10,000 years from now in the most advanced technology whatsoever, and yet no one can take away the live event of being in the room with the performers, the energy back and forth between audience and performer. And I feel like as a culture and as a society, we are never going to not need that. And so to me, that's why what we do is so important. It's vulnerable, it's real, it's an experience that's shared in the moment with those people who are there, and there's no substitute for that. And in a way, what you've been feeling on this whole campus is the craving to be back to that.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is, the last thing I'll say about this too is, with all of this coming back remote again this quarter for the first 2 weeks, and all of this adjusting that we're doing, I have felt as department chair, as creative as Zoom has been, I don't think we can do any more Zoom theater. I really think we are past the point of people being able to tolerate that now. Especially when they've had this taste of being back in the room. How do you sing in the gospel choir and then go back on Zoom? So I'm really hopeful that Omicron will fade. There won't be new variants, so that we can stay committed to doing what we do best, which is putting on live, real, in the moment events.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah. I agree. I remember attending that outdoor performance of Twelfth Night, and how the actors kind of engaged with the audience, and that was a really interesting experience. And I think you could feel how excited they were to be able to perform in front of a live audience again.
Yes,
So
and if I may respond, thank you so much for bringing that up, Amelia, because 12th Night, for those in the audience who don't know, was our attempt to come back in person. We did an outdoor performance down by the lagoon of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, and I was the director. And what I envisioned with that, and really hoped, and what really came true, was that when you were sitting down there outside at 4 o'clock on a beautiful Santa Barbara afternoon, where we all know how gorgeous the lagoon and the ocean is out there, and the way the light hit everything so perfectly. And I felt that everybody who brought their own kind of blankets and camp chairs and everything to watch the production, you could really feel that everybody was having their own emotional response to being back. Kind of like what Delilah was saying about the roar of the crowd in the dance conference. And I felt like we were, I wouldn't say performing a service, it's not exactly that, but everyone was in a way having their own private reckoning with what we had been through this art, through Shakespeare's play, and through the amazing way that the actors gave you their energy and just exploded in the space. So that I'm really proud of, that we were able to pull off.
Yeah, that was that was the first live event that I was able to attend on campus, and I'm really glad that it was. It was
too,
a lot
by
of
the
fun.
way.
So I have a question for both Professor Bell and Professor Mosley, since you guys both used the medium of video. I know that, of course, dance and music videos have been around for a while, but I feel like they haven't really been used out of necessity in the same way that they were over the pandemic. Do you feel like remote learning has brought a new medium for art with that video platform, or is it something that you just kind of used because you had to?
I think for me, for us, it's temporary. It's something, again, creative, to make it work, to keep it going, to say that despite this challenge, we won't be stopped. We're going to keep creating. We're going to keep performing. But I think it's temporary. Like Irwin was saying, people like the live feeling. I think one of the things this pandemic has taught us as humans is we need each other. We feed off of each other. And being away for a year and a half has made people hungry. We want that live experience. We appreciate that live experience. We need that live experience. We need that fellowship with one another. So I think it is, it's been good in the sense that it has made us creative, that if something ever happens, we know what we can do. We have another option. We have another plan. But I think it would not be something that's permanent. Like Irwin said, people always are going to go for the live. They need the performance. They need that live feeling of being around people, being in the theater. I was in a theater in New York right before they shut down everything, and just the experience of being on Broadway and that live experience, was awesome. And to think that could never happen again, we have to do things by video and Zoom. I think nobody wants that. And so once you go back, like I said, we just had our first live performance. I don't want to go back to a Zoom performance ever again if I have to.
Mm-hmm. I would like to speak a little bit to that. Again, I'm considering it as a tool that can be brought into use sometimes, but not something, not the main thing. And I'd just like to share how I think has had value in bringing guest choreographers into our department through Zoom while we were shut down. We had a fantastic Zoom through Arts and Lectures with Efrat Asheri last year. She was supposed to perform live and it was canceled. So she agreed to meet with the company via Zoom, and she's very kind of outgoing and very bright and happy. And she taught some movement phrases from what she calls house dancing, like New York City clubs and stuff. And she was like 2 inches from the screen, and she was just full of energy and bubbling. And she, shared her personal experiences, and that was one of the few that I felt was really engaging, but it was partly because of her personality and the way she was able to just be there with us. Of course, we had her on a big screen. It wasn't little. In the studio, the screen is very large. And so you are seeing almost like a movie. So it's like an expansion of Zoom in size. So that worked. And then also, I've been working on this project in Barcelona with a multimedia organization, and they had invited us to come this year. And I have mentioned it before, but as a backup, we are planning to do everything, if necessary, virtually. So I got grants and I'm filming the dances. So it won't really be Zoom. It will be more live stream of actual dance films, but the Zoom has been a tool to get us to that place, so that if we can't actually go there in person, our films will go and will see us, and it's the beginning of a 3-year project. So it has been very valuable in moving forward on that project. So I do say it's a tool that I find has had value, so, even if it's not fun. I have to share. I was teaching this morning in one of the studios, and because some kids are out with COVID, they Zoom in so that they get permission, and somehow the camera has been set up in such a way that you have to be at a certain angle to be seen, so that the students who are Zooming in can see you, but the students in the room can see you. And so you have to lean over really close and kind of bend sideways. And so I said, I feel like I'm in the drive-through at McDonald's, because it's so awkward. You want to be gracious and beautiful and, doing all this. And instead you've got your face jammed into the camera. And it was really funny. I literally felt like that. But so that's my little not so fond memory of Zoom.
Zoom's given us anything. We do have a lot of fun little bloopers like that. I feel like in a lot of the classes. But I do like what you were saying about the accessibility of Zoom and the way that you're able to connect with people from these faraway places that you might not have been able to before.
Yeah.
And Professor Apple, I'm wondering if that accessibility to art and performance, how that's affected theater, if you're able to reach viewers from a little bit further away than maybe you would in person.
I am so glad that you asked that, and that Delilah had brought that up, and that we're talking about this, because this was the aspect about Zoom that was kind of amazing, was all of a sudden people all over the world could see your work,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to it being limited to who was able to be in Santa Barbara that particular weekend. And I have had an amazing time teaching virtually in China, in Poland, in New York, in all of those places, and then doing a project and inviting those people, if they could do it based on what time zone they're in, to be able to see. And in fact, when we scheduled some of our performances of Immortal Longings, I remember thinking, I'd like to schedule this knowing what time it is in China, so that my friends and the students in China could actually watch at the same time. And what Delilah mentioned as well, the idea of being able to have guest artists that were not possible before, and that you could have a guest artist in your class for an hour and a half or an hour and 50 minutes. And also remember, this has been a terrible time, Amelia, for artists.
Mm-hmm.
For you have, singers, dancers, actors, designers, performers of all kinds. I think this has been an underreported story about how venues and that work completely dried up.
Mm-hmm.
And you have people who are depending on freelance gigs, freelance, income, that completely lost all of that. And you wonder, what does it mean to be an actor anymore? What does it mean to be a dancer, a performer? All of that has had a terrible emotional and psychological effect. So to be able to give artists employment, even if it's just a little bit of money, to come in and be a guest artist in a class. I did something in my Shakespeare class where I created this thing called the Naked Shakes Solo Festival, and we actually had 3 solo performances of these amazing performers from all over the United States actually perform in my class.
Mhm.
Something we never could have afforded to do if we had just been in person. So that's something that actually I hope we kind of don't get rid of. We may be able to use that technology to be able to and maybe to bring in people, and maybe also there's a hybrid way that some of our performances can really be live but also be able to be seen by people all over the world still. So I think we're still working on that.
That's perfect. That brings me right into the last question I have for you. I'm just gonna offer up one more before we move into our audience questions here. And this is one directed for everybody. I think some of you have answered it in some ways or another, but with all the bad of Zoom and online learning in general, I'm wondering if you think there are any ways that these new ways of learning and showcasing art that stemmed from the pandemic can be used after it's over, or if these things are, things that you'd rather forget about and leave in the past, or if it's a combination of both.
I think it's a combination of both. We definitely don't want to lose what we've learned, throughout this season. Like Professor Mosley was saying, and Professor Apple, just the idea of being able to reach people who, when you have a live performance, you have a limited audience in terms of the world, but with Zoom and virtual, you can invite people from all over the world. People can get to experience what others have experienced all over the world. And so I think as we're including this, we're adding this to what we're doing. I don't think it's going to be the at the forefront, but I definitely think we can add this. We can use this. Now we can have live concerts, and then we can also stream that. You can make it Zoom so that other people can come. One of the things I really did appreciate about this is that, because we're in Santa Barbara, and we have these live concerts, our audience is limited to, Santa Barbara, and I have friends and relatives in Los Angeles who don't want to take that 2-hour drive. They love it, but they don't want to take that 2-hour drive. But now they were able to watch from their homes, have friends in DC and everywhere who were able to just tune in. And so I think it's not going to go away. I think what we're doing now is we've learned how to add to what we're doing. We learned how to include this, again, to make it work. So it's not going to go away. And I don't know if, how soon COVID is going to go away, but certainly this is a tool that we can use now to expand what we're doing.
Yeah, I love what you said there about it being both. It's not an either or, it's incorporating everything. I think that's a really great example of how the arts are evolving and changing. It's not just a temporary thing necessarily. Some of the platforms maybe are, but there are things that have changed about the arts that might continue on. So we're running a little bit short on time. So let's turn to our audience questions now. We have a really interesting one here in the chat. It says, the panelists made a great case for how Zoom doesn't match the live experience. And we know the arts took a big hit the past 2 years, but do you think society has a new appreciation for the arts? Did people realize in this crisis how much we need the arts? So whoever wants to answer that can jump right in.
Well, I hope so. I really hope so. I mean, look, the 3 of us in this Zoom have devoted our lives to this, and I believe that, inspiration is as important as food and water, and, literally as air in a way. And I think from the arts we get inspiration. What's the opposite? Expiration, death. mean, and like, and the idea that you know, I hope that people cherish this and realize that we cannot live without this in society. I mean, what are we without it? You know,
Yeah.
please go
I
ahead,
think,
Delilah. I'm sorry.
yeah, I just think it's really important to keep remembering to reach out to younger people, like children, younger people. For instance, I many years did outreach performances in all the elementary schools. Last 2 years didn't happen, and it's kind of like, well, it's a lot of work. Maybe we shouldn't do it. But I think it's really important to keep exposing the younger kids coming up to art, to dance, to theater, to somehow make sure they are involved as well. It's been so easy to kind of compartmentalize them in their school or at home, and they have all the restrictions as well. And we have to kind of make sure that the arts don't get left out of their coming back into society. That's kind of what I feel. I mean, here it's set up, so we know it's going to come back, but got to keep it going in other places too.
Totally agree. I think for all of us, for all three of us, the arts have been an outlet for us. For years, it's been our outlet, it's been our release. And we didn't have to experience a pandemic growing up. And so I think, when Professor Mosley is talking about exposing the young people, this is really a great time to expose them to the arts. It's needed because they need that release. They need that expression. And so the arts is not going anywhere. I think more than anything is extremely important that our young people get into the arts. We expose them to the arts and not just the academic. So what we do is very important. I look at what I do is, I encourage people, give people a sense of hope. One of the things Tyler Perry made a statement a couple of weeks ago. He's a writer, and he said he's starting a new show on Netflix. He said, and the reason he's doing it is because he looked at the world and he decided nobody's laughing right now. And I think that's our job as the arts. We either make people laugh, we give them emotion, we encourage them, we give them a sense of forgetting what's going on in your life just for a few moments. And so the arts is not going anywhere. What we do is extremely important, and we just need to keep finding ways to keep it alive.
Those were all such great answers, and I think that is a perfect place to close it. So we can start wrapping up here. But I want to thank each of you so much for being here and being a part of this really, really interesting and important conversation. I also want to thank all of our audience members for being here today and asking that really, really good question. Is there anything else the panelists would like to add before we close out? Any final word?
I think we covered a lot.
I think so. Perfect. Well, thank you again. Before we close out, I just want to remind everybody that this event was recorded and it'll be shared on all of our social medias after this. So one of my co-hosts can kind of drop those socials in the chat if they want for easy access. That way, if you'd like to go back and rewatch or share, you totally can. Also, make sure to check out the Humanities and Fine Arts Division website. We put out stories on a weekly basis about events going on across HFA. And we have one on there about Professor Mosley's dance film. We have one on Professor Apple's 12th Night. And then we have a video on there from Victor Bell. So if this piqued your interest and you want to learn a little bit more, you can always go to the website. But all right, thank you guys so much again. Thank you to our panelists and have a great rest of your night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.